order. If we could stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda,
I move we approve the agenda.
Second?
3-0. We have no public for comments. Approval of the June 20 minutes,
So moved.
I second.
3-0. Rocking and rolling today. Okay. Now we get to our guest, Ms. Deary, who has a wealth of historical knowledge that we do not have. That's going to help us understand why the results section was abandoned.
Yes.
And perhaps a little on the PEs, how they were developed, and because they don't seem to be, in my opinion, they're not adding a whole lot to our ability to do evaluations.
No.
We accept it and then ask a few questions. It really doesn't contribute much. I know you like data, I like data.
Me too.
All three of us
Yes,
like data
right, right.
to take the emotion out of things.
Data, by the way, is now called the new oil. Seriously, it runs everything.
It does.
Yeah,
You're
it's very
right.
important.
That's good, that's good. Yeah, and the value to me is that it removes the emotion from things,
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
which is important, the history of our world. So that's a very important step forward for us, so I'm gonna let you just give us a little,
Okay, history. The strategic governance, I'm gonna give you, it'll be quick though. The strategic governance, the policies themselves, it was introduced by Valerie Truesdale on our watch. And she brought in Garita Postlethwaite, who had done it in Horry County. You probably remember some of this. So the board set up these performance expectations. When it came to the superintendent, the prior board, Earl would have been on that, hired Don Thomas, who was a consultant on education. He was an expert. Rick Caporelli talked about him because when Rick was on the board, that was when Don Thomas was hired. Don looked at this test scores for Beaufort County and the state of South Carolina, and he told the board that there's no reason we should be in the lower half of the state of South Carolina. Our demographics were similar to the state, and obviously we're richer than the state as a whole. And so what Don Thomas wanted us to do is to give metrics to close the gap with the state average over 3 years. And I'm gonna make up some numbers, make it easier. Let's say the gap is 100, this is a concept, okay? To close it, we would do, say, 35 in the first year, 35 in the second, and then 30. And that was his concept. So you don't try to do it in 1 year, but you have metrics starting with the base and going forward. And what happened in the first year is Valerie Truesdale did not make her metrics, and the board watered them down. And now it's gonna be my opinion, and Earl might have a different opinion on this,
Can
but.
I ask you, was she required to show improvement in the first year?
Oh, yes,
In the first year?
yes,
Yeah.
but not the 100.
Okay.
It was staged over, because she was a brand new superintendent. And we gave her 3 years. I can't recall whether she approved that number 3 or 4 or what, but anyway, that was what it was, 3 years. So she had to make a concept, 1/3, okay, improvement.
Wow.
The most important thing is that we all liked her. And when she didn't make her numbers, we didn't hold her accountable. So it was board failure. Me too, I was on the board. So,
Can I
Mhm,
stop you?
absolutely.
Is it reasonable to expect a superintendent to make a lot of improvement in the first year? Or is the first year kind of establish the base, and then you look for measurable, significant measurable improvements in the second and third year?
It's a good question. I'm not from the public sector, and I was deferring to Kathy coming up here, but our experts said it was reasonable. Okay. Now, the board could have done 20, 30, 50,
But,
you see?
yeah,
And there's a lot of reasons to consider that. I mean, I'm not telling you what it should be, but I am strongly suggesting accountability.
oh, absolutely.
And, but the board can't back away from it. And tell you another thing on a related subject, one of the other performance expectations was on HR and exit interviews for teachers who are leaving to find out why. We did not do that either. And the answer was from the district, teachers wouldn't agree with it.
They would not agree to do it?
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard.
Teachers don't want an exit interview?
They don't want an exit interview.
I wasn't
The best you can get them to do sometimes is to hold their last paycheck until they fill out a form that asks them for their input. We've done that. I don't know if it's legal or not, but I know, yeah, that unless you put it in their agreement when they sign their contract, as part of this contract, you're
And then
required
then
to,
you can do
I
it.
don't know.
But the-
if they do that.
Anytime you're coerced, the chances of getting an honest response
Right.
is pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But maybe it just has to be sold better, because the reason for this is so that the board can find out why,
Right.
and if there's a
Right.
pattern. And by the way, if it's salary, oh my God, right?
It does need,
Yeah.
it needs to be sold, and in business, usually you have an independent party.
That's just what I was gonna say, it has to be somebody,
Yeah.
Somebody
Yes.
outside that guarantees
Very
another
good point.
community
Right.
if you want it,
Right.
and they're trusted,
Right.
so
Right.
you know there's not gonna be any
Yeah.
recrimination, that's really the only way you can do
So-
it. Even then, you only get like 30%,
Yeah, you-
because people they've moved on.
Yeah.
But it's better than nothing.
It's my experience that when you get something like that, you get results from the deliriously happy and the really upset.
Yeah.
And the middle of that bell curve rarely takes the time or that have the interest in doing anything.
From the school's standpoint, these are the reasons we get. I'm staying home with my family. My spouse got transferred. I am done with education.
This can all
So
be,
the
these can be
things, but-
real, but the thing is, it's the pattern, getting back to data.
Oh, yeah.
So you look at the pattern,
Right.
so.
So,
Okay, but I only brought that up, I don't want to get off the subject of
Yeah.
academics, is that it is so important that the board hold the superintendent accountable, even for something that's not a direct responsibility, but. Okay, so on what we should, I would like you look at the 3 last year test scores, 2016, 17, and 18.
This chart.
no, it's the ones with the color,
Colors.
with the, it looks like this, Dick.
Okay,
It's the,
Yeah.
yeah,
South Carolina 16,
yeah. I see, ready
17,
school,
18.
ready
Yep.
school.
look at all
Yeah.
3.
Oh, yeah, got it here.
Just lay them out, all
Yeah.
3.
Yeah.
I looked at only our new majorities, our African American and our Hispanic, and why. Okay. What personal frustration I have is when the superintendent or even board members talk about achievement gap. That's not specific enough. It's our new majorities where we have the achievement gap. And as these show you for the last 3 years, every place you see a blue, just look at all the blues, that's where either our Hispanic or African American children underperformed their demographic peer in the state of South Carolina, including Jasper, Allendale, and some other very poor districts. So in 2016, there's 7 blue marks. That's 1/3 of our students underperformed their peers. In 2017, it was 15 blue marks. That's 63% underperformed their peers. And in 2018, there were 16 blue marks, and 2/3 of our new majorities underperformed their peers in the state of South Carolina.
And these are apples to apples
Apples
comparison.
to apples.
There, can I talk about what we,
Absolutely.
okay, so another thing that you can do, and I did that, and the data isn't any better, is I took the 3rd graders in 2016. Then I went to that group.
Fourth graders.
The 4th
Cohort,
graders,
fourth.
the cohort. Now, there's a couple variables. We don't know exactly how much change there's been in that cohort. But in our data as well, in the state's data, if you track those groups from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade to 6th, all the way, it all went down.
It's like,
And did the state. One other thing that I want to say, there is one other group that adds to our achievement gap that's not here, is the special education group. And they're the ones that we just got those 5 MOAs on in those schools. So that's another group of data. But, you know, if you track them, now I know there's a way, because Joan told me we have this, the PVAC, the VOS, or EVOS. In Pennsylvania, we called it PVAS because it was Pennsylvania. So you can actually go in and you can track student by student, individual students as they go through.
Every nose.
Every nose. So what you could do then is look at the cohort, okay, the percentage of African American kids. Wouldn't think that would change a lot in our community. The Hispanic might, because they're in and out. They're much more migrant. But you can look at the data and say, tell me all the kids that were here in kindergarten through 3rd grade, then follow those kids through, so you can, and just that one group, so you're always comparing the same kids.
I
So
think
that,
we get that report.
okay, we do good.
Am I
I've never
correct?
seen it.
Dr. Rhodes used to give us that report.
Yes,
The
we did.
cohort report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
Yes,
same
and that's great.
people.
Yes. Then you really know, that's a good measure.
Okay, now since, if you know it, the district knows it,
Right.
so what did they do about it?
That's the big
That's the
That's
question.
always the And plays back to my comment on the PEs.
Yeah,
They know it enough to give us the PE.
Yeah.
And like that's the end of the game.
Right.
well, this really shows that if you're behind at 3rd grade, it just gets worse.
Okay, and I was telling Kathy, it's also true of our white students, and it's nationally true, okay? But that's not an excuse, but I just
No,
wanted
but-
to share it with you. But I want you to know that the kids in the 3rd grade have been in Beaufort County School District for 5 years. Think about that.
Preschool, K.
Yes, 5 years, and the 8th graders are 10 years in our district.
so just for an example, when I took this cohort group, so the African American students that started in 3rd grade at 25.6% in 2016 and meets and exceeds, by the end of their 5th grade year, it was down to 18.5% that meets and exceeds. Houston, we have a problem.
Yes, yes.
So,
So again, I want to say, please don't just use the term achievement gap, because you are not describing our conversation. We have to bring these kids to parity with the state. That should be the #1 metric for Dr. Rodriguez, is that all our African American and Hispanic students perform equal to the state's African American and Hispanic children.
That's
That
the
is the-
minimum acceptable.
that's the
standard.
minimum, right.
Yeah, but it's gonna take years.
Because if you look at the state's numbers from 2016, the kids that were in 3rd grade in 2016, the African American students, 25.3 were, it meets or exceeds. Our group actually beat that by
Yeah.
0.3,
Mhm.
but by the time they were in 5th grade, they were down to 20.5.
Yeah.
So,
But Kathy,
I'm not saying that's an
Okay.
excuse. No, I'm not saying, I'm just saying
yeah.
that,
But that to me is not the focus.
Yeah.
The focus, I think, this is my message, is these children have to get to parity with their peers in the state. And then when we get to parity, we move out of the lower half of the state of South Carolina, then we do some really rigorous metrics. But this is the first step. Again, it is not white, black, and Hispanic. That is not what we're doing. We're coming to parity with the state of South Carolina.
Which is a low bar.
It's a very
Yes.
low bar. And remember, the state has kids in like Jasper and Allendale where there isn't as much money as
Right.
Beaufort County.
Right.
So, to me, this is really critical now. Choosing what the actual metric should be, that is really hard. Because these numbers change. You can see just in terms of the 3 years about, they're different kids, but the numbers vary by year greatly.
There's also an issue, I'm pretty familiar with Broad River Elementary. And their student turnover is so great. And
Really?
here the principal
Really?
is dealing with people that they didn't have in first, second grade, and they're getting, who knows where they come from.
Military community.
So that volatility
That's a
of
factor.
of cohort
But
is
do you
an
think that
issue.
there are schools in South Carolina where military kids are coming in and out?
We're there's only one other major military base, and that's up in Columbia, up there by Fort
Okay.
Jackson. The rest are Air Force, and they're small numbers compared to the Marines, and their rank
But
structures
how
are
many
much different.
military kids are a percentage of our kids? I hear what you're saying, Dick. Now, I didn't realize this, and I appreciate it, but can't we just,
Yeah.
there aren't enough of them to say that we can't get to
No,
parity.
and it's not an excuse,
Okay.
it's simply a situation.
Awareness.
Right.
Awareness.
And then we
And
have
that
more
means
burden.
And that means
Yep.
more resources
Yes.
need to be put
I agree with you.
in there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not to say, oh, that's why it is, and,
Right.
wash your hands of it.
and again, I think that from the educator's point of view, that's another reason to really know, the judgment on me as a school principal is how effective my instruction is if I have kids that have been with me since kindergarten to 5th grade, and they're not improving, steadily improving, I've got a real instructional program.
You even had them earlier. You had them pre-K.
Pre-K. So, as a principal, I always track to my cohorts very carefully. And I was always aware, I knew because I lived there, so I knew who came, and they came in 2nd grade, and this kid came in 4th grade, and I knew that but that's important information too, I think.
And we have map testing for all these kids.
Yeah.
They're in the database.
Yeah.
So when the kid comes into the 3rd grade, we know how he or she did in 2nd grade. Now, the map test is slightly different, but we can standardize that. But the thing is, the information is there. Are the teachers trained to really understand the diagnostics of map? And if they are they actually using that in their teaching in terms of individualizing instruction?
Right.
These are all rhetorical questions.
Right.
But that is the whole point. My concept here is you give the superintendent these metrics, and he will know what to do next to address it.
I read an interesting article just a couple days ago about education in the paradigm, comparing us with the medical. And I had never thought about it this way, and it really hit home with me. When we go to the doctor diagnoses us and says, this is what you need and this is what you need. When kids walk in our schools, this is what we have. This is
That's
our
very good.
educational
Isn't that
program.
interesting?
Yeah,
Very
and
good.
if we looked at it that other way,
Right.
and we've got the data now.
Yes.
We've got this data.
Yes.
So if we use the data to say, okay, you need this much reading instruction in this form, form, and you don't
Yes.
need so much reading instruction, you can take, you know, so it's a whole new way of thinking, but
What's the whole child center?
it is, it's,
And that we have to get around.
yeah, right, okay.
to
And you know,
show
there's
growth.
there's a lot going on in instruction, and this is, I'm in over my head right away. But one concept I found interesting, and I don't know whether any of our schools are doing it, is the lesson plan is given to the kids who take it home on their iPad. I'm assuming that they all have access at home, I don't know. But the concept is, they are learning at home, and they come into the school the next day, and the teacher's asking them questions. And so the mechanism of instruction then becomes Q&A. And I'm not saying that's the way to go, but I found that interesting. My point here is there are a lot of theories around instruction now, but that's why you hired Dr. Rodriguez. So again, it all gets back to giving him the metrics, and he will figure out how to reach them, because he's the instructional leader.
That's the way it works.
Yeah,
We set the goals.
Yeah.
yeah.
We
The,
figure that
the
out.
issue to me, back to the evaluation is, if I was coming in brand new and looked at this, I'd say, holy smokes, I gotta really look at my assets to achieve
Yep.
this. And are we putting the assets in the right places?
Yep.
And do we have, you know, we don't have an unlimited budget. So he's got an asset constraint, so it's where he puts his priorities that he's got to figure out. And that was one of the things in the instructional coaches that I just went crazy about when I saw what some of the academic coaches are up at the higher levels, when it seems to me they should be down at the first, second, third grade level.
Yes.
That's where the payoff is.
Yep.
And
Return
that
on
may
investment.
mean that we don't give the high achievers, the international baccalaureate and that kind of stuff, that kind of support. We give it where the issue
right,
is.
That's, yeah,
Yes.
And so he's got to know he's got to have the freedom to shift assets and then come back to us if he can't shift, there's not enough assets to shift, he's got to come into us
And
for
explain.
more assets.
Yes, right.
And why, where he's going to
Yes.
put it, and then I want to see
Right.
return on investment.
yeah.
You know, our percentage of budget going into instruction based on the state data says we putting the money in
Yeah.
there, but you know,
Are we putting it in the right
Right
places?
place.
Well,
Yeah.
that works into the 90-day. The 90-day plan.
Right,
He has to assess what
Right.
he's got.
Yeah.
And then in October, when we start next year's budget, he's got to tell us,
exactly.
Right.
all right, exactly what you said. I did my assessment. We need to move more here, less here, more here. And then we start the budget process. So that'll work out pretty well.
I would just want to throw out an idea that I did this to Kathy on the way up here. In terms of capacity of schools, okay? Every building that we run every day that is at 50–60% capacity, that's $1 that could be going into this. Because the lights, the maintenance, that comes out of the same budget as teacher salaries. That's all I'm gonna say, but that is, okay.
Unfortunately, that's not a quick fix.
No, I know that, but I just feel
Yeah.
better that I shared it
Oh,
with you.
oh.
Okay,
We realize that, that's
Yeah.
why we have to take care of the overcrowding first.
yep, yep.
And then we gotta take the time to plan what we do
But
with
the
the
reason we're
undercapacity.
doing it
Yeah,
is this right here.
Exactly. Oh,
yes,
absolutely.
yeah,
no, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
yeah.
And if we can
Okay.
show the public that we know what we're doing, and we're making some progress on this, then consolidation will be a lot easier. Because then they'll trust us and realize that.
Well,
I
okay,
know it's gonna
but
be
you're-
tough,
yeah,
but-
But you're implying, maybe I'm reading into it, that we have enough money here and there's no problem. So we have time to address consolidation later. And you may be right. I want to throw out an idea of, what is the specific metric now? This is the really hard part. And I'm presuming that, I know that the scores this year were the SC Ready, and I think we're gonna stay with it, because we've had a problem over here. We've done PACT, we've done PASS, we did ACT Aspire. we now have the same basic tests. They're not exactly the same because the cut scores vary, but they're the same. And I think we're gonna have a steady future, so that's good news. Here's throw out a wild idea. We had 7 blue, 15 blue, 16 blue. What if we cut the blues? I don't know, I'm just, because you know, at the end of the day, you're gonna have to come up with a specific metric. Because I presume you're agreeing with addressing that our new majorities are underperforming the new majorities in the state. And we wanna bring them to parity with the state of South Carolina.
That's our number one goal.
Right. As I said it, it's not the achievement gap, right?
Well, it's student achievement, and the subset under that goal is the achievement gap. I think it identifies special.
Yeah, I don't wanna hear this white-black achievement gap.
But
But what's
let me
written
give
in
you
what we
another
do.
perspective.
Okay.
I've got 2 grandsons in this school district,
Oh,
and they went to Ladies Island Middle School. Ladies Island Middle School does not have good test scores. I was against that. I want to send them to Beaufort Academy because of the test score. I was overruled by my very much smarter than me son saying, no, he needs to go to Ladies Island Middle School. They both excelled. Both excelled. But yet the test scores are not there because we are segregating. Because I asked him, I said, how many
Wait.
minorities are in your
yeah,
classes?
but are your grandchildren white?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that's what he's getting at, yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. I'm saying that certain students in a low-performing school are getting a very good education. But there's no outcry. I don't understand it. If my son or grandsons were down in this lower level, I would be marching in the streets.
People
they're
don't know
not.
this, Dick.
But
What I'm
you
telling
see,
you,
that's
they
why,
don't know this.
that's why the achievement gap resonates with me.
Oh.
Because you can get a good education. The teachers are there,
Listen,
but we're not taking care of our minorities. We are.
they're
we
not
are-
minorities, they're new majorities.
Well,
When you add those 2 cohorts together, they are more than 50% of our district.
understand. But as an individual, white, Hispanic, black, still the white has a larger number. But you add the 2 together, you're right. But there's a gap that I can go out to tell Rotary clubs, look, we are not taking care of.
The majority.
I can say that. But who are in these Rotary clubs and so on?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But the
You see?
thing is, you know, over the years, Dick, I mean, you could make a moral argument, every kid deserves an education.
Absolutely.
You could make a civil rights argument,
Right.
okay, racial. I don't make them anymore. I make an economic argument. These kids are our future workforce, and that'll get to my next measurement, I will get to that. But let's talk about the economics of our community. This is the future workforce.
Oh, sure. I'm just wondering, I'm trying to understand, because I've been out and talked to the realtors. The realtors don't want this mentioned.
Of course,
Um,
I know that.
I've had African American folks tell me there wasn't an achievement gap back when I was in this building. And he graduated, I think, 63, 64. And he said
I don't know if there were any metrics there.
there weren't metrics, but I said, well, how many of the people that were in this school, segregated school, graduated? What are the graduation rates? Well, I don't know. I had an African-American pastor tell me, he said, because I say, we gotta get out and get the community involved and everybody knows that this is an issue.
Yeah.
And he said, and we gotta put our assets behind it. And he looked at me and he said, Dick, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
What if we do all this,
And we
we
just
get
give up?
everybody and the numbers don't change?
Right.
And then all we're doing is reinforcing a stereotype.
No, it's all true, I've already thought about
And
that.
so my answer back to him said, well, we just can't fail. Failure's not an option.
That's right.
Failure's not an option.
You know, There was a time when the whites were the majority,
Yeah.
and we could write off these kids economically. Listen to me, Kathy.
I know, I can't,
Yeah.
I can't.
But we cannot do that anymore.
Ever.
We cannot do that anymore. So it's in our self-interest. I don't know how you communicate to the realtors or your Rotary Club, but they gotta, do you know in our public schools in our country,
Yeah.
whites are a minority in
Yeah.
our nation.
Yeah.
So, we gotta fix this.
Yeah.
Not everybody's a minority.
Yeah, I'm special, you're right.
Right, it's like the Italian government, you know, everybody's a minority, and when they form alliances, they become a majority. But Hispanics are definitely different than the African American
Yeah.
community, so I'm reluctant to add them together.
When you talk about,
I think John has, you know.
I hear John saying repeatedly, please don't call it the achievement gap. Okay. And I think that's partly because the term has been around for so long that each person has their own definition of it. They're numb to the problem. And I think this change of thinking is almost a new paradigm, where if you emphasize parity between the subsets and say that the achievement gap is just a way of illustrating problems in the distribution, then everybody will get that new idea at the same time and be more unified in their understanding of it. So I would propose that
John just
consciously
said
stop
what I've been
talking.
trying to say, but he said it beautifully. Yes.
I would consciously try to say, stop saying close the achievement gap and start saying achieve parity, at the minimum, achieve parity
With
with
the
the rest of the state
Yes.
in those subsets. And I think people will understand that, gravitate to it, and be able
really,
to communicate
now that
with
you
each other.
mentioned that, that is a stronger message that we don't even achieve the low standards of South Carolina on average.
Right. I
That's
think,
a lot
I think
stronger.
the state uses the term achievement gap though.
Yeah.
In the forms it sends us and that kind of stuff, so that would be something that we would have to,
Yeah.
like, work on.
But it's a national
Big
term
equals.
too, and
Yeah.
John, you said it beautifully, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say that all of my kids went to the school, when the school was here, my oldest children went to school. And I would say the majority of blacks in this school was successful. But the reason why they're successful is that they had teachers that were concerned about them and the community. And that's no more, because I go back even when I went to school. Even when I went there, my teacher was my cousin.
Was what
He
earlier?
was my cousin. And not only the teachers, but everybody in the community push you about education. You know, and that is no more. And you know, so the community are gonna have to get back involved like before. You know,
I agree.
that's it.
So with the right
When I'm in
metric,
polls,
with the right metric, the superintendent will initiate that community outreach.
yeah, our goal, so our first goal is student achievement. And the second bullet under that is eliminating achievement gaps between students of all grade levels, ethnic, racial, gender, disability, and socioeconomic groups. And we use SC Ready and EBAS.
But that doesn't say as much as I'm saying.
Right.
I'm asking you to add parity to the state.
Well, I agree with that.
Within the
That's the
demographic.
measurement, yeah. I agree with
It's just-
that.
yeah.
Don't disagree at all with that. And we can certainly do it under that goal. When we get down to specifics.
I know, that's the
We're
hard
gonna
part.
measure it ourselves against,
So let's assume we're gonna have the SC ready for the next 3 years as well. Can't count 2019, because, so it's gonna be 20, 21, and 22. Certainly by 2022, there should be no blues. right? Because what blue means,
Yeah,
we're under the state.
if you look at this, really, the scores are not horribly
No.
disparate from the
correct.
state.
That's
So
right.
I would agree with that we should have no blues on here at the end of,
Or maybe sooner. So
Well,
that's your call, I'm
yeah,
not telling you.
yeah.
Well-
You know, so, let's just say 3 years, because these are gonna change the state, but we're not that disparate right now from the state. And this,
And where there's a wide variance, I do wonder sometimes about the data, you know, because, but I would agree with you.
like, you know,
But like, School for Creative Arts, okay?
that's a specific one you're looking
In 2017, there's a 6-point difference between School for Creative Arts and the, oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, the yellow threw me off. Forget what I
at.
said,
Okay,
my error. I agree, Kathy.
yeah,
Yeah, it's reasonable.
it's reasonable.
Certainly reasonable in 3 years,
In
because
3 years.
that's why we have the exceeds expectation on
Right.
the evaluation.
And when this
Do it
is,
in 2 and you're exceeding.
right, and again, this is the percentage. I think a lot of times what we've been shown, well, a lot of times, I've not been on board that long, but the data that we've been shown where the percentages are much higher and where we may be higher than the state includes the category approaching.
Right.
And
They don't
Approaching.
use that anymore.
they didn't use it this year?
Oh,
Approaches,
approaching.
meets, or
Yeah,
exceeds.
no,
I
you're
think,
right.
I think, but
Yeah,
we
we
don't
should
care,
not.
I mean,
Approaching,
We used
approaching
to-
is not.
We used to count approaching, there's.
yeah,
Thank you
yeah,
for-
Huge
yes.
blue
Thank you for
Yes.
bringing that up. No, it
No.
should not be in here.
No. Now, the approaching group, this is what we talked about before, the approaching group, those are the kids that you really target, because if they're approaching, they're, you know, we figure out what push, not that you're not looking at the kids who aren't approaching, but those approachers are your target
Very well,
students.
but every teacher should know how many approachers he or she has in the classroom, by name.
Yeah.
One would think so.
I know, John, but something tells me they don't.
Let me ask an educator a question on this. What is more difficult? Is it more difficult to start at the pre-K kindergarten level and reduce the differences? Or is it more difficult to take the 4th grade level and reduce the difference up to 8th grade? So, in other words, two
Got it.
parts.
But if you can eliminate all the blues, you have to do all grades.
Well,
Yeah.
but where do you start?
Yeah.
Where do you
That
put your
really
emphasis
is,
start?
I'm sorry, Kathy, but I think that's Dr. Rodriguez's.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just,
You know, the educational research and from experience says that if kids are reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade, they will have greater chance of retaining that grade level. When you're behind, when the kids are not reading at grade level by 5th, 6th, 7th grade, it's a much harder task to bring them up to grade level in terms of reading.
I'm just asking, you know,
Yeah.
obviously we wanted to get rid of all the blue,
Right.
but you've got a limited amount of, if we had unlimited resources, we could probably do everything at
Right.
once. But if we have limited
We
resources,
look at the approaching.
where do we go after first?
Yeah.
It would seem to me, start at kindergarten,
Yeah.
1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, and get them, you know, say that, listen, you gotta get rid of that gap right now, and we're gonna do the best we can.
But again, this is what Dr. Rodriguez's job is, not the
Right.
board.
No, I
Yeah.
understand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But what we want to do is we wanna have realistic expectations, and the board's expectations ought to be very specific as far as,
So it's beyond getting rid of all the blues by 2022?
I don't know, you know,
And I don't know what, we start map testing in kindergarten here? Does anybody know
I
when you
don't-
start with the MAP test?
I thought it was
I
third.
don't know. I think it's like, I don't know. In fact, I think
No,
there's a,
MAP,
there is a,
MAP can
there's a
start in
version of
first
MAP.
grade, I know.
There's a version, my understanding, Kathy,
I just
but you
asked
can't
Ma'am.
apply it going forward. It's just within like pre-K and K.
Okay,
But the one that goes, third grade kids, I think the second graders have it, but I'm not sure.
well, I know they don't use the, dibbles here, which is what I use.
But again, all of this is at the
That's data.
superintendent's.
Yeah, but we're looking at a data, for some, we'd have to figure out what they have here if we're gonna put in a metric for the earlier than third grade.
I'm just looking for reasonable expectations, we need to have reasonable expectations
Well,
of, and I don't know that getting rid of all of the blues by 2022 is a reasonable expectation. It may be, but that's something for the board to set what the reasonable expectations are. It's not, it's Dr. Rodriguez's
No,
mission
right.
to achieve
No, this is,
those
I agree with you,
expectations.
this is a tough question. And then the question is, so after the first year, let's assume you agree, we'll get rid of the blues in 2022. But what do you want to measure them on in the first year? Or you're not gonna wait 3 years to find out if you made it, so.
Right, yeah.
Okay, John, I'm sorry.
Remember the old maxim that the time to accomplish the task expands to the time allotted for it? Okay? Challenging expectations can still be considered reasonable. You don't want to get to the lowest, lowest
There's a fine
expectation that
line.
you can guarantee that will be met.
We don't want to guarantee failure,
Right.
and we don't want to guarantee success. We want to be between
But we got to
those.
define what we want.
Okay, what about if there are 16 now blues, and he's gotta get to 10 by the first year?
Oh, man. That's
Daniel,
the
Daniel's-
first year?
He's got, the problem with that is that there's no leadership in the, he,
I know.
Yeah.
He's got to build a team from scratch.
yeah,
I know.
yeah,
Daniel says we assess kindergarten through 8th grade in reading and math with math testing.
Math
Okay,
testing, okay.
kindergarten, okay.
Thank you. And again, I keep going back
Yep.
to our goal.
yeah,
Under student achievement, the first bullet is on grade level in all subjects by third grade. Because the theory has always been,
right.
and the state
Wait a minute now.
buys into that.
That means 100% of the kids
That's the goal.
have to be meets and exceeds?
That's the goal.
That's crazy.
That's the goal.
That's crazy.
Whose goal is that? Ours?
That's
our
the board goal. Yeah.
No way.
It might take 10 years to achieve it, it doesn't say.
I
It's
would
not-
never, I would not
it's-
agree
it's-
to that. No,
Well, then you're,
I'm not on the board though.
yeah, I was gonna say, you're not on the board, so, but this is the goal, this was
Yeah.
the goal that was set. And I think when the goal was set, there was no time
I
for
mean,
it
if
put
a
on
kid
it.
has bad hair day on the day he takes the test,
Well,
No.
yeah, we don't, I got a special ed kid, so I don't,
No, I wasn't talking about that.
sensitive to the
I
testing.
was- Okay.
Oh,
No,
Yeah.
I understand how testing goes.
Excuse me, David, but is the assumption that the goals are not going to change?
Hmm?
Oh, my
Why?
God.
Because this is the goals that I have in front of me, John.
Huh?
This is the goal I have in front of me, because these have been our goals for the last 2 years. As I said at the board meeting, if the board wants to change the goals.
Yeah, okay, fine.
They better do it quick.
All right,
Because
that's what I was after.
The whole theory underneath this group is that you start from the goals and it waterfalls down. From the goals come the performance
I want to be
expectations,
on
comes the
record,
results.
as somebody not on the board, that goal is, I'm sorry,
Unrealistic.
ridiculous.
yeah, unrealistic.
Did you mean unachievable?
Yeah, I do.
That sounds better than
Okay,
ridiculous.
okay. So, well, I
There, I
thought,
fixed that
thought I
for
could use
you.
that.
But as Dr. Moss would say, it's an aspirational
Oh,
goal.
God, please.
Yeah. Oh, boy, he hung on
Well, the
that.
problem,
No.
when you write something broad like this is the problem. That's gonna go out to the public, that these are our board goals. If you write it, we'll endeavor to ensure that 80%, 70% of the students perform on grade. The people will say, well, what? You don't want everybody to, and that's where it gets
We just
into
want
that.
to get to parity with the state.
Well, that's the job of this group. That's,
right.
that's the results piece.
Yes.
Right,
these
And
are
once he
nice.
achieves that, then
The
we
results
up
is
the
what
bar.
counts.
Yeah, right.
But it can be done. When Dr. Trozel was here, she took Royal Branch Middle School.
She did,
Royal Branch Middle School.
yes.
Mona Lisa Dixon, and I can't remember the other gentleman's name, at the elementary. But they signed a contract.
Don
And in
Doggett.
two- Huh?
Don Doggett.
Yeah, Doggett. And they, in fact, when those kids went to, that was the ninth grade, went to the high school, every one of them passed. Every one of them passed. And every one of them went to college. Yeah. So it can be done. But you have to have the right people there to do it. And it was
If you
done
have
in
the
two-
right people there, wow. Yep. I don't know how much time you're allotting me, because I have one other goal I want to get to.
As
Do you want to
much
stay
time-
on this, or?
As much time as you
Oh,
make
really?
you feel satisfied.
Oh, okay. All right, let me go to the other goal. And maybe we can even wrap around. Yes, okay. It's these two, high school senior outcomes for 2016 and 17. Okay, let me give you some background before we look exactly at the data. I think, well, South Carolina, the state now, believes that every high school senior should have some kind of post-secondary education. They believe it so much that this data came from their website, okay? But everything I read about our country is that the businesses believe it, everybody believes it. And it's interesting, when, at one point when ACE was going through a change in leadership and what would be their motto, and I threw out an idea that I still like, although it wasn't accepted, is that you may use your hands, but you're working with your mind. And there is a prejudice that if you're working with your hands, you're dumb as a brick, but it ain't true. But you may use your hands, but you work with your mind. So this does not mean that every high school senior is going to a 2-year or 4-year college. It does not mean that. In fact, the background data, I didn't give it out to you, but off the website, it includes the military. So if you go into the armed services, you're considered that you've done some post-secondary. If you get a certificate in, I don't know, welding or landscaping, whatever the certificate is, you are counted as having gone to post-secondary. So it takes a full year to get the data. So the latest data we have is 2017. So I know it's 2 years ago, but what happens is that in the fall, okay, our kids just graduated now in June, okay? By September, our district will have to have reported to the state what outcomes for every kid in the senior class. So the principals are reporting to the state what their outcomes are for every senior in their building. And then it takes the state a year, to put it out in the next report card. So that's why these are the latest 2 pieces of data.
How do they capture that data?
Well, you know, Dick, let's talk about that. You're leading me perfectly. Go to 2017 and look at Battery Creek High School, which is in the middle there. 221 seniors, okay? Go over to the percent post-secondary. And look at it, it's 28.8%. I'm going to guess that that's an error, and that somebody dropped the ball at Battery Creek High School. I'm not on a wire, right, so
Yeah, it's
nobody's
way
gonna
out, it's
figure
way
it
out
out.
from the other schools.
So, to answer your question, the burden is on the principals to get the right data up to the state.
But how can we do that?
Well, that's called district support.
Well, I'm
You're-
I'm trying to figure out the mechanics. You call, you have their old parents' phone number and say, hey, is Johnny what's Johnny doing now?
Yeah.
That's what.
I don't know how they're doing it, but it's being done. That's the important, it's being done.
I'm just.
And some schools do it
I'm just
better than others.
questioning the accuracy of the data, because I need to know the mechanics of how you collect that data. Otherwise, it's garbage in, garbage out. And I can't imagine there's any way that you can force that kind of data. I mean, there's no way I can say,
Okay.
you gotta report to me after you graduate. Hey, I
All right,
graduated.
You're right. Let's assume that this data is very marginal. Let's assume that. Do you agree with the measurement?
Oh, yeah. I'm just.
So you do agree
The measurement's
that
important.
every senior should have some post-secondary
Oh, no, absolutely.
education?
Absolutely. But
If we
it's
are
how to-
including military enrollment and as post-secondary,
Oh, yeah.
as long as that's included.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out how a principal will gather the correct data and not have it skewed. Because I don't see any way that you can get that.
You know, when the kids graduate, there's an exit for, are you going to college? Yes. But you don't know whether they actually enroll. Are you going to, the kids that are enlisted in the military, right? Because they
Take the
recognize,
aspect.
yeah, and they recognize those at graduation. Remember, a lot of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
Does that mean they actually, though, went in after they accepted? So I see where your
Dick,
question
the
is.
reason I want this metric is I want to change the culture at our high schools. I want the principal of our high schools to believe that their job is not just to get the kid with a cap and gown, but that they have a plan for their future. I want that to be part of the principal's job. And that's where it goes to the superintendent. If this measurement is given to the superintendent, he will make sure that the principal's job description includes this.
But you-
Wait a
yeah,
minute, John.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, it seems as though the real job at our level is to say, is that data we want? And if the answer is yes, it's Dr. Rodriguez's job to make sure that it happens. The discussion ends. Any talk beyond that is window dressing.
There's the new state regs, though, require that there is a plan written for each graduating student. It starts when they're in 8th grade, right? And it's a to college plan or to work plan, correct? So think of that chart that we've seen, college ready, work ready. So they're supposed to have these plans, so I wanna look up and see, I don't have it at my fingertips, but see if I can find how it's defined as work ready. We've seen that,
Yeah, but there are certificates. I mean, if you had like Karen come in here, she could explain that to you. But what I want to get across to you is Rick Caparel and I are calling this the invisible 600. We had 600 kids who, I don't know what they're doing, but they are unprepared for a decent job. 600. And the prior year was 600, so that's 1,200. So if every year, and Rick came up with the term invisible 600, it's because, we think we did the job because they were walking there with a cap and gown, but what kind of job are they gonna get?
I absolutely agree with you on the goals and where we should go. My problem is when you set a numeric goal for principals or anybody, they're gonna move heaven and earth to try to achieve that.
As I would hope
Okay,
so.
but that makes temptation
To cheat.
to cheat. And it's just like the graduation rate. When Dr. Rhodes came up and briefed 86% graduation rate, and that's gone up 5% in the last 2 years, okay, now how about your ACT and SAT scores? Have they gone up the same percentage amount? How about your SFEB scores? Have they gone up the same amount? Or are we
True.
just cheapening the standards, since we don't have end-of-course tests anymore, and we could do the same thing with what they're doing out of post-school.
What's
Well,
the-
they said they're going to college, so check the block.
What's the alternative? Do nothing?
Well, no, the alternative is not do nothing. The alternative is to know our kids better, know our parents better, have our community involved better, and say that that's important, and say that we want to hear from you because we want to know how Johnny and Janie is doing, but there's got to be something that doesn't make them tempted to cheat.
Well, let me just look at the same page, 2017, and look under the column that says hashtag not graduated.
Yeah.
Over 200 kids did not graduate of the high school senior class.
Is that?
And even though our graduation rate went up,
From that, yeah.
those are 200 plus kids who
Yeah.
did not get a diploma.
Well, is that
And
cohort? Is that cohort by cohort?
These are high school seniors.
These are seniors.
Yes. They were seniors in 2017, and they did not get to walk on the stage, 200. In the prior year, 200. So they're only 1/3 of this invisible 600.
Yeah.
And I hear your comments, but the point is that we want our principals to believe that their job is that, yeah, every kid should walk on that stage, but they have to have a future. Job isn't done. And that's the culture, you know. And you know, we're talking about building Kate's buildings and all that stuff. But you justify it here. This is the number.
Yeah, when you talk about graduation rate, that comes back to stats also, because
Yeah.
Rhodes would always tell us about that, and I would always point out, nationally, they did a little better than we did. So you can't
Yeah.
track that graduation back to something we did,
Right.
because in the whole nation,
No, it's true,
it went up.
but the
So when
thing,
we get to statistics, we've got to somehow, like we're comparing to state, we've got to take into fact that, you know, the high tide raises all of us, so we're gonna have to be careful. As you were focusing on cheating, we also have to be careful we don't take credit for something that seems to be a systematic change.
I want to say, you know, we did brag about the 86% graduation rate, but what it doesn't tell you, that 200 kids, nothing. They were lucky to get a job.
That's true. Right. We-
So the percentages detracts from the numbers, the actual.
Right, the celebration
Yeah,
detracts from the job you have yet
right,
to do.
right.
That's always a problem.
So I strongly believe that we're in about the 40 percentile. 2016, about 40% of the kids either did not graduate at all or go on to any kind of post-secondary education. Then it went up to 44%. I think you need to give the superintendent a metric on that. And that one, you know, anyway, what the metric is, I mean, you wanna go back down to 40% or 35, I don't know. But the metric needs to be there so that if and when the Kate buildings are built, we have programs the kids want, not the ones we think we need. I mean, how many kids want to weld? I don't know, it's a rhetorical question.
That's a
About
real
300.
popular one.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
we need,
I think
yeah,
it
okay,
was about
that's a,
300.
yes.
Okay.
We
There's a
have
wait
more
list.
kids in there, there's
There's a wait list.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway,
Yeah.
but the thing is, you have to have, the demand has to be there, the kids have to want it. And you know what, they'll want it even more, is if there are employers who are saying, you know, and by the way, Earl, you may know this, but apparently the Beaufort Chamber of Commerce has a program starting in the fall. And 30 students have been identified in the Whale Branch cluster. And to work with employers, in other words, to prove to these kids that if you learn ABC, we have an actual employer who wants you and are going to internship with them. It's a trial program with Beaufort. County Chamber. But that should be everywhere. Now, I know there's gonna be problems with the logistics because not every kid has a car. So how do you go from the schools to the workplace, et cetera? But, you know, we gotta start talking about it. And then, you know, I wanna remind you that, Earl, you remember Sean Alfred. And you know, he's superintendent in Aiken now.
Thank you.
And he started a program called Aiken Works. And
Great article.
yes. And he hired someone whose job it is in the district to go and talk to the employers and recruit them to get involved with their high school kids. And figure out how to give them internships and job shadowing, et cetera. But his name is Larry Millicent, but he is an employee of the district and he's out marketing to the employers. Because, you know, if there's no welding companies, I don't know if there's welding companies here, Robin, but, you know, I'm just gonna, you know, having 300 welders.
On days, they do some jobs on
they-
base.
Yeah, on the base, okay, but you see my point.
And
But
everybody's
welding,
waiting
Yes,
for the
You
port.
wanna
Yeah,
have the
and
employers
everybody-
giving you input, Kathy.
Right. the
yeah,
infamous port
exactly, and
company.
I think, yes, and I think it's my understanding that in those programs like that, there is employer input. And,
Okay,
Um,
as long as there is.
yeah,
I think Karen does that in
Okay.
we need
working
to
with
get
the
more,
Kate
we
in
need to,
the.
yeah,
One of the issues I ran up against in that, I've got a number of people that own HVAC companies in my neighborhood. And we had a little social gathering and I mentioned, I said, you have a need for HVAC? Oh, gosh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
There's I'm sorry,
And then I said to him, so why can't all you HVAC companies get together and work with the school district and give us a projection of needs and
starting salaries.
and with starting salaries and an apprenticeship kind
Yes,
of a program?
yes.
And they looked at me like I was crazy. And
Why?
And I said, yeah, they said, there are, I think he said 15 HVAC companies in Union County, 15. These were two different companies, two of the 15. And they said, we compete against one another.
Mm.
And so, is everybody gonna share in this program? Or are just those, you know, so he said it's very, very
It's a
difficult.
value
It's much easier when you have a Boeing plant, when you're dealing with one
Because there's
big
no
employer
competition.
right.
and so on, but they're competing. And so I said, well, you still need the people.
Yes.
And I said, do you even get together as a group? Oh, of course not, because then we'd have to compare prices
Well,
and
that's
everything
where-
else. So that's an issue.
But that's
how to
where
do it.
Larry Millicent, the guy
Yeah.
that works for Aiken County Public Schools,
Yeah.
he could make a difference in interfacing, I'm making all this up, with the 15 HIVAC companies.
Right.
But you know, that's a perfect example. You know, if you're gonna repair a HIVAC, you may be working with your hands.
Oh,
But
oh, yeah.
this
Oh,
is
oh,
where
yeah.
it's going
Oh,
on.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yes, John.
David? I would venture that that's further need, as Joan would say, for Dr. Rodriguez to have an instructional services department that, and advises him that he makes the decision whether the school should be going out to the companies or the companies should be coming to the school. If it's our responsibility to get that in the proper curriculum, we can't rely on the companies to come to us solely because they're not accountable to the kids, to us, or to the citizens. We gotta have the people that we hire to do that go out and do it. It's the superintendent's job. We gotta define for him what it is we want, not how he does it.
Rick Caparella and I suggested to Dr. Berg that there be an employee. But, you know, was interim. So, the thing is that, assuming Dr. Rodriguez gets a metric about post-secondary education, assuming that the board agrees to do that, Dr. Rodriguez might want to contact Dr. Sean Alford,
Oh, yeah, well, sure,
especially since
that would be
Sean
the
worked
smart
here.
move.
Oh, my God, yeah,
But our point is,
yes,
we want a metric.
We want
Yes.
that.
Yes.
That's
That's
the
the
whole point about
Yep,
it,
yep.
yes.
I strongly urge you to have this metric.
I do not think you're gonna get any resistance to that at all. I'm trying to determine the will of the committee by looking around.
Oh, yeah, so
I
I,
don't think you're gonna get any
yeah,
resistance.
I'm still looking for that thing, just to see what the state, I think they call it, do you know what, that graphic that I'm thinking of? We've gotten it several times, and it's yellow, and it's, here's the college, and here's the two pathways, and I think it's called the employability credential.
Mhm.
That's what the state's calling it. But I can't,
I
Oh,
love
the
they use the term
credential they give out.
certificate.
Yeah, they give
oh,
a
is that, oh,
certificate.
that's for that? I just have that thing stuck in my head, that picture, and I just wanted to compare it to what we're talking about in terms of measurements for, I'll find it at some point. When I get home, I know I have a hard copy.
And that certification says that they're ready for a job.
Yes.
Right.
Doesn't say they get a job.
No,
Right,
but they can
right.
walk in.
Right,
Say
and
I-
I think
Right.
that's
And
what
they can
you're
walk in
talking
with a
about, that would
certificate.
mean, yes,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
That's
So
like
that's
when,
the
you know,
measurement.
nobody's
That's-
asked to see my college diploma, you know, but I tell them that, you know, I did. And this gives everybody the opportunity to say that, yes,
So-
Yeah, we definitely want one
Certified.
of those.
yes, right.
So David, we need to plan to then sit down and start as a committee coming up with metrics
Yes,
and then give that to make a recommendation to the full board to adopt these metrics and have a discussion.
Right, and that's because we've got the 90-day behind us.
Right,
Right.
right.
So our next thing is get the metrics to do that second part.
Good.
It's not gonna be easy.
No,
Which is why we're reviewing the PEs to see
Yeah.
if there's
Right.
any yield in there.
yeah.
I don't think there is, but that's just a gut thing. There might be. So that is what that's our mission
Yeah.
now, is to come up with the metrics and the specifics and do the specific, measurable, relevant
Right,
time
it's
down.
not-
Right.
Because we have to have time parameters on everything. Because that old results section, I did get to see it before this year. And I was impressed. I looked at it and I said, whoever did this knew what the hell they were doing. But then it went away.
So,
And
and
it was
And that's
never
probably
held,
the most
nobody was ever held to it. That was.
Important message for your full board is.
this is liable to be a long is this a kind of a work session kind of a thing after we do our work as a committee? Because I don't see this as being easy.
Accepting the metrics, you mean? That we
Yes.
come up with?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
But accepting them
I don't
over
know
2
how
or
long.
3 years, I mean,
Yeah.
you just can't water them down.
First, we gotta sell it to Rodriguez, the metrics. I think. And then present it to the board.
yeah.
Because
But
you
we
want him to
can-
be
we can-
enthusiastic,
Yeah.
yeah. Seriously, I'm not joking.
And
And I don't-
no, I
yeah.
agree with you, and the smart thing is, that A part that says achievable or attainable, whichever,
Mm-hmm.
that's his, he owns that.
Right,
Because once he agrees, he's agreed it's attainable, and then it's not aspirational anymore.
and,
So that's why I'm so keen on getting him, because, you know, the old saying is, nothing's impossible for the person that doesn't have to do it.
yeah,
So, I think that's,
Yeah.
our next step is we're gonna, and it's not gonna be easy for us. We're gonna have them out, but Joan's suggestion is that's one of the metrics we should use is.
Oh, yeah. I fully agree.
And those are the 2 I'm recommending officially. I mean, there's so many other metrics, but I just, these are the 2 that I wanted to communicate
They're good.
to you.
The other issue with metrics for me, just for me personally, is if they're not timely enough, you can't adjust.
What do you
So
mean by timely enough?
if they just come around once a year,
Oh,
all during the year, you don't know how you're doing, and then at the end of the year, like in
You get a
October,
surprise.
you say, oh, this is how we did last year.
but you're waiting for
So
the state.
you're a year off, yeah, I
But
know,
both of
I know,
these-
but I'm just saying, that's one of our challenges, is try to come up with something that we can look at
Well, you know, the thing
as
is,
we go through the year. And if that's the principal's evaluation or the teachers who are
yeah,
in
but
the
that's the
classroom with the
superintendent's
kids.
job.
I understand, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, we need something, I think, that's a little more timely than this is how you did last year. So I think that's one of our challenges. If that's not possible, it's not possible, but
You know, it's-
if you were in a business, that's what you would want. You would want something that is timely enough that you can make an adjustment. Say,
Right.
Depends on how-
That program's not working.
Yeah, how often it's
Yeah.
measured.
And, okay, so,
Yeah.
I-
That's one of the problems.
yeah, I believe we used to give the map 3 times a year, and did we go down to 2?
We
Because
did?
you just do, I think you just do it in the fall and then
In the
the
spring.
spring.
Because if we did it in the middle,
December.
you know, then you have that's your, measure as how, you know, you're getting, if you
No, but can I,
use map, yeah.
Valerie introduced MAP testing, and she described it to our board as it is a purely diagnostic testing. It is information for the teachers, not for the board. And we never saw the results. But but they've taken away 1 out of 3 tests. That impacts the teachers. It's a diagnostic test.
Right. And
I'm incredulous.
I think that the reason that they took it away is because the time it takes to test.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And, you know, but let me tell you from this is what the teachers say. You asked me to teach and be held accountable for this. You've now taken 2 teaching days away from me.
But the
There are
point in
6 days
December is so the
altogether.
teacher knows
Yeah.
whether that
Right,
kid
oh, I agree.
has learned 3 months.
Well, I also believe,
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm getting emotional.
yeah,
John?
I have to go, but I just want to say that this was an extremely pertinent, powerful conversation, and I think you all are doing a great job.
Thank you, John.
I say it's not easy, and I'm saying that from my experience trying to nail, as you know, trying to nail Dr. Moss down to specifics. We didn't have the measurements. We just had these annual measurements that we got too late. And I know that the teachers in the classroom know how they're doing.
yeah. So
So somehow we gotta get a hold of that.
what
Can I just-
formative data are they using? That's what we would want to know maybe. And you know what? Based on what Dr. Rodriguez wrote in his entry plan and his data that he's used, maybe we ask him, what data,
How do you do it?
what could we measure? You know, what would you suggest that we ask for a mid-year measurement on
Or
data?
in every quarter?
And
'Cause,
see
yeah,
what
I
he
do
comes up
remember
with.
he
Yeah.
said that they had a dashboard.
Yes, the
and
dashboard.
Every teacher
Yeah.
had this dashboard.
Joan, you
Dashboard.
didn't
Yeah.
see
So,
the
yeah.
presentation he gave to us while he was interviewing, and he gave us a 90-day plan, and he went out and got data, our data,
Yeah,
and displayed it and said, this is where you need. So I think he's data-driven.
yes.
Well, that's
And,
good, that'd be
so
superb.
I'm pretty comfortable that he's going to be right all over this, as
Yeah.
saying, I need to know what your expectations
See,
are, because I'll
that's
follow
2 ways
that.
to look at data. I believe data helps me learn and do
Sure.
better, but other people consider it a criticism. But it sounds like he doesn't.
No, I
No, I
think
very
he
good.
does, yeah,
Oh, no,
Yeah.
he's
Very
did it.
good.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he gets
It's
it.
very good.
yeah.
He gets it.
By the way, I don't know which one he made the comment, I just wanna, Herb told me this. When I showed him this data, and I said to him, what was the reactions of the principals? And when you hear this sentence, somebody said, now somebody else knows what we know. Think about that. Somebody else knows what we know.
Well,
That's what I'm trying, the teachers know.
Yeah,
Yes.
there
It
you
doesn't
go.
get up to
Yeah.
us.
bad news was not filtered upward in the past,
Yeah.
because messengers, you kill the messenger. So we have to change that culture, that bad news tells us where the challenges are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I think we shouldn't even ever use
It's
this.
easy to say, but really hard to do.
Oh, it is, it
So
is.
it's a
Yeah.
But
cultural,
that is a big deal.
it's a cultural change. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I actually think we have to redefine the word failure. You know, it's so negative, but, you know, it's also. like
Chance to,
When I miss a ball.
Opportunity,
Yeah,
opportunity to improve.
Yes.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. We can't accept failure.
No.
And we say, you
No,
may
no,
be-
don't put it, I'm
No,
sorry,
I'm
don't
saying-
put it that way.
Yeah.
No,
It's an opportunity
we can't accept the term failure.
as negative.
We say, we accept the term challenge,
Yeah,
because that's where we want to go. We don't want to pigeonhole you off and say, have a good day, too bad
No, but
for
to me, the
you.
word failure says, you know, okay, so what? I
It's
made a mis-
final, and we
Final.
don't want it to be
Final.
final.
That's
We
very
want
good.
it to
Kathy,
be,
that's
it's,
it.
a failure isn't, you know, when we say failure, then people write it off, it's
Yeah.
final. Nope, it's
No.
just the beginning,
Yep.
it's the beginning of our next step,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Or an adjustment, yeah, the saying
Yeah.
is you don't fail at anything until you die.
Right,
I've not heard that before. That's
So
great.
you always have a chance until you die, then you have
Yeah.
a chance to do anything.
yeah,
That's good.
okay.
For me, for notes for
Sure.
clarification, the two metrics that you're recommending are
Comparison to
the
state.
comparison,
Comparison to the
State,
state.
in
State, okay,
SC ready.
SC ready.
State.
Yeah.
for African American and Hispanic only in terms of the
for
superintendent.
parity.
For parity with the
Parity.
state.
Right.
And you got the second one, Robin, which is this one?
The high school outcome.
High school
Right.
outcomes.
Right. And the percentage of kids
For a second.
who either
Or
do
the
not
public.
graduate or have no post-secondary plans should go down
Yeah,
without any specificity at the moment. So it's both did not graduate, but even those who got the diploma in their hand, if they don't have something, the
a credential or
certificate or
military,
anything, yeah.
You know, we have a graduation for the adult education coming up.
Yes.
And that would be very interesting to poll those folks and say, why?
How old are they, those students?
Well,
I don't
they
know.
vary, I think.
And they're
They're
very,
from like 19, most of them are
Or 18, you have from
18.
18
18,
and on up.
20,
Yeah.
25, or
that's our numbers.
Yes,
Yeah,
600 every year. Invisible 600 every year.
oh, you know what, and that's, I can't believe that, that's a Saturday, July 27th.
27, 10 o'clock.
Yeah, 10 o'clock,
I'm
I'm
gonna
at Peter's POA that day.
Oh,
I'm the guest speaker at our POA.
oh, good.
Ah. Well, I'm hoping that they're gonna let me give a little address to the, I asked last year if I
Oh, good.
could
Good.
give a speech.
It'd be great.
Okay, so now do we want to move on to the PEs?
Yes, that is our agenda. And the purpose of this is to see if we can glean anything out of these PEs that will give us the specific and measurable things we need.
Oh, can I, I'm
to go
sorry,
with the goals.
Robin,
Ma'am?
I don't know how you notes, but I would like to officially suggest to the board that under student achievement, that first goal, that every kid will be on grade level by third grade, that be modified. Can that go into the minutes?
Put it in minutes.
Sure. Thank you.
Before we do the PEs, Dick, is this in good enough shape, or do you think it needs to be formalized now?
Oh, the goals?
The 90-day, no, the 90-day.
Oh, the 90, I think it's ready to go in the
Okay,
final
I know
form.
you mentioned, I just want
Yeah.
to make sure,
There's one,
because we want to hand it to them on.
Yeah.
You said by third grade
see
level?
here, I didn't separate, it's a no big, see, I didn't put a space in here, so this one didn't end up with a block. Its own little square. See, those blended together,
Oh,
and there
okay.
should have been a spot there, so we just
Okay.
need another.
So,
Okay.
so Robin, what we're looking at is
Okay.
on letterhead letter,
Okay,
with all these all this on there with a signature block for Dr. Graz and Dr. Rodriguez,
okay.
because we want to hand it to him on the 1st of July and say, and have him sign it, have the chair sign it, we're ready to rock and roll. And then we make copies of the final signed document. We give it to all the board members
Immediately.
immediately.
Don't let a day go by.
And you know what? But these are the directions. They are to hold on to this.
Yes.
Because
They're
when
gonna
we
fill it out.
ask,
They're gonna
yes.
fill it out.
Don't ask us to print another copy for you.
No.
Hold
Well,
on to
no,
it.
well,
You
no,
can
you know,
say-
that's not true.
You can say that.
Unrealistic
You
expectations.
can say that.
Let's
It's
go
like
back to
saying
the-
the speed limit is 55.
Let's say that we're not gonna be making folders.
Say it.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, so let's go to the P's.
Alright, this is on the other day.
We got
I have to,
7 minutes.
Ugh,
I have to tell you, these are terrible.
the PEs.
They're so verbose
Uh-huh.
and
Mm-hmm.
and they're so, you know, all the different DRP 2.1, ATV
Well-
4.4.
What
and
that
all
is, the DPR and
Yeah.
ed, they relate to the advanced ed
And
standards
that's,
and the, so all of these were put in there to show how, that they all come together, so
All-
they're the same
all it
ones.
takes is a statement up above that, all the below corresponds to the standards. And you don't have to put it next to every one of them.
Well, they were trying to figure out, in the advanced ed, number 2 goes to that standard, and the DPR goes to that standard. So that's what they were trying to show, that they wanted it on one piece of paper, previous, so that they didn't have to go pull out the different manuals and show how they reference to. So that's where that came from.
That's where it comes from. I agree with you, that's why I said we gotta see if we can glean anything out of here. Because I haven't found in my years that the PEs have been at all helpful in the evaluation. Because I agree with you, they're extremely verbose. There's too much, they're too broad. They're not focused enough.
And the last one, number 11, is the brand new one, the FOIA.
FOIA, right.
So it was never put in the format as what you see in P1, so it just,
I don't have.
That's the
11's not.
Oh, that's
Oh,
this.
oh, got it.
so what
got
I'm
it.
saying
Okay,
is
yeah.
that was a new PE that was developed, and so when they asked it as the board, we did not go back and say, oh, this is what you wanted. They just approved the format and how they wanted to see the report.
Yep.
So there isn't really the superintendent will and blah, 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 blah for
Right.
the FOIA.
Right, that's why I like the FOIA one.
So, so,
It's pretty
and
straightforward.
if that's what you all want, the PEs are really your PEs.
Yeah, they sure
And
are.
for what you say that you want,
Mhm.
or what you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to see. So if that's the format that you want to see it in, because you all even determine the form, you know.
Yep. Yeah,
My
and this obviously is the product of 11 people.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, I wanna put in also that
And it's a cover your
you need
rear
to
end.
wear,
Yeah.
need to wear matching socks.
And you know what I would
Yeah.
do with this? If I was the superintendent and I was looking, you know, I would say, we come up with a system and say, okay, for PE1, this year, the target is number 3 on this list and number 7 on this list. Because, come on, you're gonna give us evidence that you've done, that, it's a book then that we're requiring. So, and at different times, things ebb and flow, and that would just be my 2 cents.
By the way, I don't see any exit interview.
The other parts with the PE is that the senior staff was directed to, so there were, some of the PEs were combined. And some things were taken out because they weren't, and that was the recommendation that was sent to, so these aren't the PEs of Jones Day. Because some
They're not recognizable.
they have been combined, removed. And then the senior staff went through and they matched up, okay, so in Arab Learning, number 5, the DPR, we had to go through the advanced ed, so that's what this one is, through, the advice of the superintendent.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see, is I would like to see performance expectation referencing the goal, not not the advance, I'd like
Right.
to say, this
Yes.
relates to
Yes.
goal one.
Yes.
Right,
That's that whole waterfall there. Here's the goals.
Yeah.
PEs line up with that,
Yeah.
and then the results line up with the PEs. So,
I was actually thinking, you know, what if we looked at this and said, okay, contacts are not working so well, but under, the highly effective, under governance and board relations, it says, it's proactive, it determines district needs and policy priorities, has a system in place to ensure timely administration of district things. So that's under governance and board policies, that's P1. PE2,
Could
yeah, something like
Right,
that.
and I agree, but I tell you what, my thought
Okay.
was,
We made it bigger, so
Yeah.
you have it in your folder right now. We just
Here.
took it and
Yeah.
enlarged it.
um,
I'll tell you about this. in the
First,
PowerPoint.
let's see if there's anything of value in here. 'Cause I
Okay.
think changing the PEs is probably a little further down than us coming up with our results.
Right, okay.
So I don't want to get too distracted on recreating the PEs. But if there's something in here that we can use, I didn't want to overlook it.
That's true, yeah. Well, like I said, I took these.
I haven't found anything of
I haven't found any.
Yeah, I just aligned
it. And that
them.
might be, and I'm envisioning that that would be one of our recommendations to the board. The PEs need to be redone
Yeah.
because there's nothing, they're too general and
Yeah.
whatever we want to say.
This is how the PEs line up with that. They're in section, you know, all the governance, the one about the
Mhm.
FOIA would go on the governance one.
Mhm.
The one on human resources would go on C, whatever C was, right?
Can
That's,
we get that in the minutes?
sure.
That's
Yeah,
helpful.
that's.
I'll just give it to you and you can.
Scan it or?
Well, that's, I was just gonna tell you, that's from Michigan, that's the Michigan Superintendent Evaluation Form. It's based on research. We did, when we started this process, we did quite a bit of research. And that form is based on, I don't know if when I presented it to the board the other night, I had the research. That's where some of the research is from. And it's based on the National Policy Board for Educational Administration, the standards. So, yeah, okay, thank you. I actually talked to these people on the phone to
David,
ask them how they
when
came
I
up with
read
that.
this,
That's required in the whole state of
Like,
Michigan.
areas of learning environment, number 7, gather, analyze, and
You may
use
have
data
changed
and
it,
research in
so
making curricular and
we've got-
instructional choices.
First four
Duh.
parts all have weights,
I mean,
and then
I think the
You,
people who developed this, that was a novel.
get a total
approach for them. Yeah, that's so general.
for
But then we do get the
professional practice
report. The
rating.
report
There's a
says
total.
that's how we did
It's like
this.
we would do our schools.
I've never matched the reports up to
But
the
then
report.
you have.
And
the
how
student
do you
growth.
quantify
So
the-
this would be our
Yeah,
metrics.
and that's what the results are
weighted,
for,
And
right?
we were actually talking about
Exactly.
doing
I
more,
don't want to get
25%.
too far.
And then progress toward.
Earl, what do you think?
That's what
Are we on the right track here or not?
I think we are.
That you
Okay.
are
I think so.
adding up,
Yeah.
and coming up with the total score.
I'm not really sure how the PEs are supposed to fit in, but I don't think they're giving us what we need for the results.
well, you know, I see, when I look at this, I thought the instructional program was all garbage, frankly. The financial administration, I thought, and human resources and so on,
Okay,
asset protection, that kind of stuff, most of that is, you know, okay. I would get rid of all this and stuff in boat legs.
yeah, when I read this, I thought, this would make a nice policy.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah.
But it's.
Not a performance
but it's not a
expectation.
performance
Yeah, that's what
Performance-
it is, right.
Performance is supposed to be, this is what you said you do, and this is
Yeah.
what you've done.
Right.
Yeah, the only hesitation I have is because the results actually do that.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how the PEs fit in. And that's just my ignorance of how the strategic governance is.
You know, I also.
So maybe these are fine, maybe.
I also crosswalked it with this, and it seems like it's redundant.
It is, yeah.
And that could be, we could recommend it. you don't need these because they're in the
Yeah.
evaluation.
So I guess, but backtrack a little bit, it's my belief, and I could be wrong, because no one ever really explained this to me, but that the performance expectations, they come before the board, and we certify, then they give us a report how they're making, so it's kind of like the employees are giving us status reports on these things. So instead of having them give us status reports on these big things, maybe it's status reports. We had a PE presentation the other day, or a couple weeks ago, to the academic committee, and it was on the grading system. It was so poorly done. Because one, the PE had so many components to it, and you'd say, well, what about this, what about that? And, we were like reluctant, that's why when we brought it to the board, we said, with continued monitoring. Because the PE was so extensive.
And all we do is accept the report.
That's right,
That's all we do, is we accept
Yeah.
that you gave us a report.
yeah.
Like that.
Is it a requirement that we have a PE by anybody other
And
than
this
ourselves?
is my ignorance of the strategic governance. I think that's
That's
a
the
part of it.
concept.
That's the concept.
It's raison d'etre, is to actually describe
Action,
what you're
What you
expecting.
expected, yeah.
But for the superintendent.
Yeah, because all these functions
Right.
report to
But
you.
that,
This
And then
does
the
the same
results
thing.
quantify.
yeah,
This
Well,
does the
that's
same.
where it could be.
This
Yeah.
does the same thing. I could see this if I was coming in brand new, and I'd give
This
this
is-
to the superintendent. The superintendent would then go down to his folks,
right,
and it's maybe his performance expectations from them to him.
Mhm.
But his performance expectations to us is this.
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
I'm sure Robin has the original ones that were done in 2007. I mean, it'd be just, I don't know if you're interested.
Yeah, these
Just-
are revised and.
revised.
I know,
Yeah.
because I just think that the document we had was very clear. It wasn't all this,
mm. So you were on the board when it was revised, David, what kind of
No,
process?
I
Oh, you weren't on
didn't.
215?
Didn't come on until February 16th.
Oh, okay.
wait a minute, this says adopted May 9th, 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Effective July 1st.
These words DRP and advanced ed, I never, no,
That might have been the
and
revision.
the adoptions, yeah.
Effective the 2008, yeah.
I mean, we got policies, we got ARs, we got PEs,
Oh. Yeah, well, the policies and then the ARs are supposed to be derived from the policies.
Policies, right.
It's the same
Well, you know-
process, but it doesn't seem to be working.
We were
When I
told,
was on the policy committee, I said, I want to see a crosswalk of how every AR links to a policy.
It has to.
To an AR to
Has
a
to.
policy, that makes sense.
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's just like we're saying
Yeah.
goals to take,
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But my memory, and I could be wrong, is that the board did not review the administrative rules. That was the
Right.
superintendent's job, so my memory's right.
And that's why I pushed and said, the board makes policy, so your ARs need to
That's
come
right.
down from the policies. We don't tell you about ARs because they're administrative,
Right.
but they better hook into a
Yes.
policy.
Right.
Because we got all these renegade ARs. And you can see from the crosswalk, some of them are very nebulous, that connection. Um, All right,
Robin, would you, no, do you have the original policies that Valerie Truesdale agreed to? That'd be 2007.
PEs.
PEs.
There- I have that book.
Okay, so I'm just gonna,
yeah.
if they want it,
Yeah,
Send those out to us.
I thought it was
We'll take a look at
clear.
Yeah, well, I don't think we can glean anything from here
not much.
to help us in this.
No.
So that's basically all I thought
Okay,
needed
yeah.
to get accomplished.
No, it's good to look at it and
Yeah,
just,
just see it.
it's, yeah,
We don't want to do stuff that's already being done.
right.
And I just don't see
So,
anything in here.
on this, for Monday, this just goes on letterhead, I'll make the couple of
Yeah.
corrections, put the signature, and then Christina, signature lines for Dr. Rodriguez and Christina.
Yes,
Correct?
but we don't want him to get it without us sitting down to talk about it.
Is that the one with the goals?
I think we should give it,
Oh,
we should,
give it to
on
him
the
and
first
let-
of July, he ought to have it, and then
But he
have a
doesn't need
meeting.
to sign it that
so
day.
Yeah,
so
okay.
he
This
can
is
read
like
it
this.
through it.
No, ma'am.
No, it's,
Those, that what you have is the board goals as of 2017.
On this, yeah, we wanna have it all formatted up for
Okay.
Monday.
Okay.
Give it to them. Nobody's signing it.
this is the
We'll have to
90-day
call.
plan? Yes,
Oh,
sure. And see,
So
this
we'll have
is,
to arrange
we
something.
changed those
It's
percentages,
gonna be
and
kind of
in the
busy,
90-day
but-
entry plan, the metrics,
I'll bet.
that's not included
Yeah,
yet.
we have
This is
agenda
just-
settings
And this is
at
based
4:30
on
on Monday,
his plan
prior
that he
to the
presented to us.
policy committee meeting.
So we,
So I don't know if
and then
that's,
these are the scores, the numerics that
Right.
we're gonna
Right.
use. And
Yes.
We didn't go into detail what
No.
that rubric has.
Yeah, that's right, you'll be
And,
there at that.
well, you can
Right.
read how
Yes.
each individual
Uh,
board member's gonna do it, we're
Yeah,
gonna
that's
come up
good
with
time.
it. But those are the.
Yeah,
So
we'll
that
get
might be
right
something-
before, get 'em right before the agenda setting meeting.
Mhm. Okay, tell me, I missed
Yep.
that.
so agenda setting is Monday at 4:30, because I'm gonna send that out to you today. It's gonna be
Okay.
at Bluffton Middle,
Okay,
prior to the policy committee meeting, which is at 5:30.
okay,
So, you all were talking about for Dr. Rodriguez to get this document, can have it for Christina to give to him,
Right.
um,
Yep.
for Monday.
Should be at the agenda setting meeting, so.
Right.
Right.
so-
Not in the agenda setting.
Right, correct, no, because it's not on the, it's not on the agenda,
Right,
but.
it's not on the
but she
agenda.
always brings her things to sign.
I do.
It has
I
to be
do.
done before the agenda meeting or after the agenda.
Yes,
Yeah, and then
We-
they could both get their copies with the understanding.
so
No
you will
signatures.
communicate with her, you would communicate
Yeah.
with her that this is what I'm bringing, so
Right.
that she,
Right.
Okay,
We'll let her know that this is, look it over, and we'll set up a time to talk to Dr. Rodriguez
yeah, great,
about it, and then if he's comfortable signing it.
yeah, perfect.
And then we'll ask Gina to sign it.
And are we, I'm sorry, did we set a time for our next results committee
You know
meeting?
what I mean? That's the recap,
Okay. Oh, that's the recap,
or
great.
the future topics. I hope that fits in there.
What?
I don't want to get 40 on this. Yeah, I hope setting up the meeting is okay. All right, let's,
so the week of the 8th, or do you all meet, are you all meeting next week? On Monday, the 1st is ad hoc, or
agenda,
agendas and
policy.
policy. There's nothing on the 2nd, and then on the 3rd is academics at 4 o'clock.
And is that here?
Yes. We have a holiday on the 4th, and I'm gonna have a holiday on the 5th.
I'm fine any of those days, so whatever works best for you guys.
Whatever works best for.
Do you all wanna do it on the 3rd?
I was thinking the
Since
3rd,
earlier, or?
and do it earlier.
Okay,
This time of day is good for me,
1 o'clock?
especially if we have a free lunch.
We'll have a free lunch next
Free lunch.
Wednesday.
No, free
We'll
lunch.
have a
Oh,
free lunch
wow,
next
let's rethink
Wednesday.
that. All right, so we'll go for July 3rd at 1:30, what's the easiest for you?
Kathy, you have to be here at 4,
4.
so what time?
And you wanna move it back so that it's closer to your 4 o'clock?
It doesn't, I mean, do you want to meet for longer than an hour and a half? Because
We could do it at 2 and say we'll
Yeah.
go 2 to 4.
okay,
That, that'll take you right into,
yeah,
July 3rd?
Third.
2 to 4, 2 o'clock? Okay.
July 3rd at 2 o'clock.
all right. Oh, I just wonder if I wrote down. Policy. Okay,
Okay.
all right. Perfect. I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right,
Unanimous, that one's almost always unanimous.
I know.